everybody. This is Chris Backer, National Director of Ecclesia Network, coming at you with what is an official Merry Christmas. I've been waiting to do this until we were actually in the Christmas season. So, Merry Christmas from my family and the Ecclesia family to all of the Ecclesia churches and pastors and leaders across the country. And I've been thinking a lot about you the last several weeks as I've been walking through the season of Advent and now leading into the Christmas season. And what I've been reflecting on is how significant it was in the incarnation that we really had the presence of the divine, the presence of God in the person of Jesus Christ, dwelling here upon the earth. And there are so many things that we could say about the purposes of God in the incarnation and in the life of Christ and in his death and resurrection. But one of those most central is the significant difference that his presence makes here in the on-the-ground realities of life. And when it was in his time, whether it was in the forgiveness of sins or in the exorcism of a demon or in the formation of a kingdom community that embodied a different way of living, a new kind of life with a different view for God's purposes in the world, or whether it was through a healing, we saw the significant difference that the presence of Jesus made in the lives of everyday people and in cities and towns and villages throughout Israel. Now, we know that that presence eventually becomes manifested through the Spirit into and through the church. And a number of years ago, I wrote a small article called The Ark of Advent, which talked about how the purpose of Advent ultimately leads us to the Ascension and to Pentecost, and the distribution of the presence of Jesus into the people of Jesus so that that presence can be manifested really all across the world. One of my favorite sayings from Dallas Willard was that Jesus understood that part of the purpose of his ascension was so that he could get out of the way of the Spirit so that the Spirit could bring his presence to bear at any time when he was no longer in the flesh. And of course, we know that gets carried out through the church. And that becomes really important when you think about the work that so many of you are doing and how you are carrying out the presence of Jesus in the world today. And that has really on the ground practical realities. For instance, I was encouraged this past year when on that Saturday morning in August, I woke up and turned on the news and I saw what was beginning to take place and had taken place the night before in Charlottesville. And I was encouraged because I knew that there was an Ecclesia church there, All Souls Church, that was going to be, because I know them, that was going to be manifesting the unique presence of Jesus in the midst of all of that chaos and divisiveness in a way that was probably going to be different than was coming at what was happening there through all of the politicking and the news and the different angles that people were taking, and that ended up being true. I'm grateful that in a year where so much attention has been focused on the bitterness and the divisiveness of what's happening in Washington, that we have a church in the district that's manifesting the kingdom-centric presence of Christ there in the nation's capital. When you think about this past year and all of the discussion that's been happening really over the last couple of years about the racial division in our country, I'm grateful for churches like Next Gen Church and Rhythm Church in Miami and a neighborhood church in Dallas and Kairos Church in Los Angeles and the district church again in D.C. that are manifesting and demonstrating the presence of Christ as it breaks down those racial walls and divisions in a group of people coming together to forming a new kind of family as part of God's family. When you think about what's happened this past year and all of the revelations of men in positions of power that have manipulated and abused and oppressed women in ways that probably none of us really expected to hear about a year ago, I'm grateful for a network of churches that supports women in leadership, that seeks to advance their opportunities that are before them. And I'm grateful for churches like Next Gen Church, Neighborhood Church. I'm grateful for University Christian Church, Kairos Church, Evergreen Church, and so many of our churches that have women in senior leadership roles. And And all of that, as I think about what's happening here in our country, in America, I'm grateful that in so many cities that there is an increasing presence of churches like Ecclesia, and increasing presence of churches that are in Ecclesia that are manifesting the unique witness to the life and the kingdom there in that community. I was in Florida a few weeks ago, and I was meeting with a new church and their leadership team that was getting ready to come in and join our network, Brick City Church in Ocala, Florida. And one of the things they were sort of remarking to me was how lonely it feels to be a church like them, a church like an Ecclesia church there in that particular city. And as I thought about that, I thought, there's probably so many of our churches that really feel that same way from time to time as you try to carry out the work of the gospel in a unique way in the middle of all of the divisiveness that's happening in our country, and you're trying to bring a unique kingdom perspective into that. But number one, that reminds us how vital it is, and that's what I told him, how vital God's appointed role for them in their city and in their time, because they're going to bring a voice that other people aren't going to bring. And second, to remember that they have a family of churches, and that you have a family of churches all across the country that is there to walk with you, to pray with you, to stand with you, to give along with you, to share in this journey of trying to bring forth the reality of the gospel of the kingdom here in our increasingly post-Christian and secularized context. And so I've been so grateful for all the churches in our network over this past year and the work that you've been doing. And we love you. We support you. We can't wait to see you at our national gathering in April. In the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot of news coming out. I'll send a financial update in the next few days. There'll be information about new churches joining the network that'll be approved at our annual board meeting coming up in a few weeks. And, of course, a lot more about the national gathering coming in April. So make sure you have that on your calendars. And until then, we love you. The Ecclesia staff and board pray for you. We pray for God's blessing and His power and His provision to be on you and on your community in this next year. Thanks, and we'll talk to you again soon.